Okay, so I'm going to get this started here. What I'm going to be outlining right now and sharing with folks is how I'm using Obsidian to organize and systematize a very large scale writing project. This is the bulk of what I've been doing for my sabbatical this semester. And I had to develop these systems at the beginning of the semester because prior to this writing project, pretty much all of the other writing projects that I've done are mostly articles or book chapters and things of that sort, smaller size projects that are not as sprawling and large scale. So as I started to work on this, I was finding that I needed systems and I needed tools and I needed platforms. And one of the kind of most valuable tools and platforms I've been using for writing most recently over the past 2 years is Obsidian. So I tried to figure out ways to use mostly Obsidian to sort of manage this large-scale writing project, and that's what I'm going to be sharing out. So in the past, I'll start with how I'm managing the various things and remembering what I want to do and what to do the next day, because pretty much every day I create my own schedule since I'm not teaching this semester. In the past, I've used OmniFocus as my main task management system for myself, and then when I'm working with teams, like kind of managing a large project where there's people working with me, and I have to delegate, I used ClickUp. Prior to that, it was Asana. And so OmniFocus I was starting to use at first, but I was realizing that moving back and forth between the writing and OmniFocus was disruptive. It was like a lot of context switching. So I tried to figure out, are there ways that I can remember things that I want to do from day to day in Obsidian? And there were two things that helped me with this. So what you're looking at right now is the projects plugin of Obsidian. And I didn't know how to use this prior to this semester, so I was figuring out as I was going along. And what it basically is a table or a database that you build out, and you can look at it in multiple different views. So I'm looking at the table view, and if you're wondering, I have my main screen over here, and I have another monitor where I keep this on the other monitor, and I could flip it into like a Kanban board perspective if I wanted to. I don't usually do that. I'm mostly always looking at this table view. And in the table view, at any given point, I can add a note here in the bottom. So throughout the day, I toggle back and forth between what's on the main screen where I'm writing, which I'll show in a minute, and then on my left monitor, in a separate window, is the Projects tab, and then the Daily Note in a separate tab. And my Daily Note I use usually on days where it's not a typical teaching day, because those days are largely structured for me with classes and meetings and things of that sort. I use my daily notes when I don't have a pre-structured day, and I have to structure the day as I go along. And so for this sabbatical project, pretty much every day I'm structuring, and one of the things I do is I don't pre-structure what I'm doing by the hour. I take a look at my projects tab, and I take a look at what I've done the day before and figure out, okay, today I'm going to work on X, Y, Z. But the important thing for me that I didn't start doing until a couple weeks into sabbatical was I started tracking my progress. And part of that was just sort of for myself, because I found myself working all day long and then going like, how much did I get done? And how much did I get done this week? And feeling like I wasn't getting as much done as I thought I should be getting done, knowing that this whole sabbatical is dedicated towards working on this project and also my health and well-being and all things of that sort. So I started tracking my progress, and because Obsidian is awesome and lets you interconnect notes, I could just say, oh, I started working on this, this part of this writing project. Or today I looked through the NASM handbook, and if you're not a music ed person, this is an accreditation document from an organization that accredits schools of music. And I was thinking about the relationship between these NASM accreditation guidelines and curriculum, not even about schools of music, but that's a different tangent. I'll talk about that some other time. Anyway, I'm tracking my progress, and I actually have a document that I'll show some other time where I can grab all of these progress portions of my daily notes. So it's just a huge document of everything that I've been doing. So that's one place where I track what I've been doing. And then in this daily note, the other thing that I will do is as I'm coming up with things, so I'm in the middle of writing a document on the different, this idea that you can teach the same concept in different projects, right? So that's what I'm writing about. And then in the middle of it, I'm like, okay, was looking through this NASM handbook, and now I have this question about the way that it discusses oral skills, but I don't want to do that right now. I might list that under current issue to address, and then at some point in the day, I'll take it out of there and I'll put it into the projects database. And sometimes I go directly to the projects database, but it's two different ways that are less disruptive than going into OmniFocus and setting up a task there. So this task management has been really helpful for me. It also tracks what I've completed. My favorite thing about it is actually over here I made priority and energy capacity parts of each task, and that's helpful for figuring out what I want to work on each day. So on a typical day, I'm going to work on things that are high priority and have the needs of a high energy capacity. That's what I'll be working on at the beginning of the day. For me, I know other people like to flip the kind of degree of energy that they need for a task. And so I work on high priority, high energy capacity throughout the day. And then maybe as I'm sort of, my energy's petering out, but I feel like I still could be working on things, I'll move to like more medium or low energy capacity. So for instance, transferring curriculum assignments, what that is, and I can even open this up. That's another neat thing about the projects tab. Each task is its own note in Obsidian. So here I have move all of the curriculum assignments and readings into concept notes and then put them on the canvas to help organize the project. And then I have where I was. So I can keep going back, and you can see this is in process. This does not take much thinking. I mean, it's basically transferring notes and transferring information from one place to another place, which is something that I do want to get done. But that's not something that I want to do in sort of like the beginning or the middle of the day when I'm ready to go and I have like a lot of ability to concentrate. So task management has been really amazing in the projects plugin. Highly recommend the projects plugin if you're doing project management for a project. I don't know that I would use this as something to like list like things for multiple projects. For me, it's like one project that I'm working on, everything's in here, it's all related to the project. I don't need to worry about other things cluttering it up, and it's super helpful, and I can put in as much or as little information that I want. So that's one thing that I wanted to show in terms of project management. The next thing that I wanted to show is another plugin that I'm using with Obsidian. This one also I hadn't really used much prior to sabbatical. So this one is called Longform. And Longform is actually somewhat similar, I would say very similar, but somewhat similar to an application called Scrivener. If you've never used Scrivener, it's a writing application that lets you organize large-scale writing projects by building it into different kinds of chunks of different granularity that you can kind of have almost like folders of information. So prior to a large-scale writing project, when I was working on articles and chapters, it used to be a long time ago that I would do it in Word or Pages. Then I started moving into more of Google Docs and having multiple Google Docs, and things were getting very unwieldy. And I have found out about my own writing style, and particularly this semester I found it out. I work very non-linearly. So working up and down in one document would not work well for me at all for a project of this scale. And having multiple Google Docs that gives me nightmares. But working in Obsidian, where I have hundreds or thousands of notes and files, and I wanted to experiment with writing in Obsidian, and so I was trying to figure out, are there ways to write in Obsidian for longer style writing in the way that I might in like a Word doc or in a Google Doc or in Pages, things of that sort, or in Scrivener, which I've used in the past. And this Longform plugin has been really fabulous. What you're looking at here on the left-hand side, it refers to as scenes. And each scene is basically a note or a file in Obsidian that just has a little bit of front matter that lets the plugin know that it is a scene. And it's very easy to set this up. I'm not going to go into the setup of how you set it up. I'm going to show you how I'm using it. So what's really cool about this is I've been working for the past couple of weeks. I'm working on this idea of there are shared characteristics between problem-based learning and project-based learning. That's part of this large project that I'm working on. And so each of these labels here in the long form, once I click on it, it goes directly to the note that I have, which is in this case writing. So this is what would have been in a Google Doc or a Word doc, and here it is in writing form, and I determine as I'm writing like how big of a chunk it is. I'll also explain what all this metadata and these headers are in a minute, but if I wanted to move from students being responsible for their own learning and then discussing dynamic power balancing, like the dynamics of power balancing among teachers and students, instead of having it be another heading in here, I just created a whole other file that's right here at my fingertips in Longform. And the other thing that Longform lets you do is very easily move things around. So let's say like, oh no, I wanted to start this section or this chapter with this. I can just drag and drop entire chunks of writing because they're files here. And so this makes it, I don't want to say very easy, but super flexible to move your writing around and reorganize at will. There are a couple of friction points that I've experienced. So it's a fabulous plugin. Definitely recommend checking it out and using it. But a couple of the friction points for me, one is that I might decide that these shared characteristics of problem-based learning and project-based learning don't actually belong in this part of the project. I actually want it to appear, let's say, over here. Well, I would love to be able to just drag this whole set. Like if I were to fold this, imagine if it's a folder. It's not a folder, but as if it were a folder and just drag the whole thing up to this area. But it doesn't work that way. If I were to drag this, which I'm not going to, it would only drag this file, and everything else I would have to drag manually up there, which after a while, and you have a ton of content, that can be frustrating. So I haven't figured out a workaround to that yet, but for now, it's so great for what I'm using it for. I'm not worried about that. The other thing is this weird phenomenon where it can get pretty sprawling, right? I have a lot of files that I've been working on over the course of the semester. If I unfold it, it doesn't actually compress the space. It just gets rid of all the files. So it does make it easier to look at, but it's just a weird fluke that I haven't figured out what to do about that. So Longform, again, is really fabulous for organizing. And then I have this kind of random to organize. Like they don't have a place yet. But again, each of these is a writing chunk. Here is something that I was writing on a story about a hymn song of Philip Bliss, which is a concert band piece, but I kind of trace it all the way back to the hymn Well Within My Soul, and eventually it has something to do with curriculum. But it didn't really have a place yet. I was just like riffing on something that I had experienced that day. When you are writing and you have things added to long form, they just kind of populate over here, and you kind of add them, and then you drag it where you want it to go, because I've set up basically a long form folder in my vault, and everything goes there. So what I'm doing throughout the day is I usually have, I'm toggling back and forth between long form view of my Obsidian Vault and then my regular files view of my Obsidian Vault. And so depending on what I'm working on, I have other videos on this. This is just tons and tons and tons and tons of concept-based notes down there. But I have a whole folder for this project that's just, again, super sprawling. I need lots of ways to organize the information. Otherwise, I would get lost in my own set of stuff that I've done. So I'm more often in long form right now than the files. But there's another view that I'm going to show in a minute. That's sort of the primary space that I'm using to organize everything. So before I was talking about the project management space. Now I'm kind of overviewing this Longform plugin. Over here is where I'm doing the primary writing. So let's go to something that's not fully done but has more content in it. So this idea of, where do I want to go? Designing projects, addressing intended learning curriculum. This is something that I was working on the other day. Okay, so one thing I wanted to show, this again is another thing I developed during sabbatical, because I've never really had as much use for metadata for writing. Because if I were to look back in any Google Doc that I have or any writing docs, I don't think there's anything that I would consider metadata other than what the computer puts on it. Now I'm manually adding a ton of metadata in everything that I write because I'm thinking about how I'm using all these things in relationship and also understanding the power of Obsidian to be able to create databases of files. So I have that in my mind. So I created a whole bunch of what in Obsidian are called properties, which used to be called YAML. It's just metadata. Some people also refer to it as front matter that you can do things with. And then over time, I figured out, I'm using this particular metadata a lot, so I've created templates as well. So it's as easy as when I want to write a new file, I just have a key command, and actually I use this thing called a stream deck. So I press a button, it creates a new note, and it throws all this metadata in if I tell it it's going to be a writing file, which saves me a whole ton of time. And the metadata that I use the most are the date that it's created. So you could see I created this file on the 13th. It automatically, whenever I create a new file, it just puts writing as the type, and then I have a couple of options here. It's going to be this particular writing type. It has this automatic tab. It goes to a default because of the template. And then later on, as I'm moving from a very early writing stage to a more refined writing stage, what I think I'm going to be doing is adding additional metadata that has to do with the concepts that this particular writing focuses on. And then I'm already thinking in terms of what some people describe as like the nightmare of creating the index. I'm going to be sort of building the index bottom up. So as I'm writing, I'm already thinking of index terms, and I'll be putting it into the metadata. So it's going to be I don't want to say super easy. In fact, I'm going to knock on wood here. It's going to be very doable to create an index because I'm keeping track of possible index terms as part of the metadata of the various things that I'm writing. So I'm excited about that. And then also status. So right now this is, I would call this a pre-draft. It's not quite a draft, but it's enough that I'm moving on to writing something else. Task, I have in process, completed, not started. This is in process. Next steps are notes that I write to myself about what I need to do. You can see typical ones here in this list. The nice thing about having this also as metadata with properties is that it keeps track of the things you typically write. So this just speeds things up. And then I know from other writing projects, I know that I write too much, too many words. So I'm going to give myself word limits for each chunk as I'm writing. I'm not at that stage yet. So I could put the word limits here and keep track, and then I'll put the current word count. That way, I know from past writing experiences that what I'll tend to do is, let's say it's like, a couple months from now, and I'm more in a refinement sense headspace. I'll start refining a document, and I'll be happy that I got my word count, 200 fewer words, and I'm not going to spend the extra hour getting it to 300 fewer words. I'm just going to move on to something else and start working at that, and I can come back at a later point and use these word limits and word count metadata to help me keep track of where things are at. And then, as I showed before with the project database, I can easily then put that into one of the items of, okay, go back to this particular file and work on the word count. And so, I'm using these systems all together. Okay, so the next thing that I've used to organize these notes and these files is I gave myself headers as defaults for the template, for the writing template. So here, I'll just go through all of them. It automatically will put the title as a link here, and then it will put the project here. That's just a standard header. Now, for this part of each file, sometimes I start with this. Sometimes I come back to it. I'm not going to do this typically until I have the right granularity of what the file is, because I'm still very much in throw it all in a file writing mode. But I like to stay organized with generative or driving questions, and I see myself including a lot of these in the actual writing project. So as you get to addressing intended curriculum through project-based learning and problem-based learning, what's a big driving question that people should think about as they're reading through that? And then what's the big idea? Why does it matter? what should people consider, and how might people take action. Those are things I'm constantly wanting to think about that will help organize whatever the writing chunk is. They might not appear explicitly in the writing. They might. Haven't decided. If I have a lot of stories that I'm constantly thinking about, and this is also a part of the project is on curriculum development, and I engage in a lot of what's called curare, which is autobiographical, sort of past, present, futures curricular thinking. And so I often have these stories that I'm referencing, things that happened in the past. Sometimes they're speculative future stories. So I put the stories in the story area because sometimes I might move the stories around. I want to be able to go right to the stories. And also remember that in Obsidian, any header is something that you can embed in another note. So I could be in another note and then take the story from this note and embed it in there and then move it around. Again, Obsidian is super flexible for interconnecting information, which is why I'm using it in this way. Any kind of connecting points that I'm thinking about between this writing chunk and another writing chunk would go in here. And then the key points is where the bulk of the writing is going right now. And this is now just writing. Okay, so what you're seeing here is this came from this literature note. So I'll show you in a minute how I'm actually doing the writing right now. That's going to be the next thing that I show. But I'm maintaining the links to the citations right now as direct links to those notes. And then later on, I could clean it up and make them citations. But in this stage of the writing, I want to go immediately back to the source. So if you're wondering what does this actually look like, I can open this up here. And this is just a literature note that has all my notes from that particular writing. I have a whole other video on how I create my literature notes and turn them into concept-based notes, but here I'm using information from literature and citing it. That's basically what we're looking at here. And then I'm organizing the writing chunk into these headers, and what may happen at some point is I might take an entire header and make it its own writing chunk. I'm just not at that phase of the project yet where I know how big or small any particular writing chunk is going to be. So I'm kind of feeling it around as I go, just kind of scrolling down here. And this is maybe like a little longer than a typical one of the writing chunks. And then at the bottom, I have broaden and deepen. And what this is either references or resources or other writing that will either broaden into related areas or deepen this area that will probably not appear in the writing chunk, but maybe things that I either reference or possibly that I include this information somewhere else. And then the action ideas, I want to always keep in mind, how can people apply what I'm writing about in a really tangible way? Like if I'm a practitioner, if I'm in the classroom, everything I just read, what are some things that could guide action, that I can take action on these things? And then I always have leftovers. I have entire files of leftovers from pretty much every writing project that I've ever done. And so instead of going to a separate large massive leftovers file, I have a leftovers area for each writing chunk that I can, again, eventually get rid of it. Because one of the weird things that I haven't figured out yet is if there is a way, and if anyone knows how to do this with Obsidian, I don't know if there's a way to say only count the words on the page from this point to this point and exclude blah, 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 because it's going to be picking up all the stuff in these chunks. So if you're like, what is with all these headers that don't have any writing with them? I'm just thinking about all the different ways I might use the writing. So I have my own ideas and questions to work through, related concepts. I want this writing project to include a whole bunch of possible future stories. So, and what are ways that this could live out in social media? What are ways that this could live out in a website? What are ways that this could, what happens if someone reads something that I wrote and is like, I really didn't jive with this idea. I want to remember that. And so I have like all these, ways of like sharing the ideas, related posts on websites, and I have footnotes down here. So I'm trying to think of like sort of the lifespan of the writing project in the file from the very beginning, and building in the metadata and the sort of templating that will support that. which for me, it's a lot of work on the front end, but I think is going to save me time on the back end. So every one of these files on the left looks something like this. Okay, so where did I start to get any of this information? That's what I wanted to show next. So I'm going to skip over to another screen now. This is just another window on my computer in Obsidian. And this is my lifesaver for this project, which is Obsidian Canvas View. So Obsidian Canvas View, if you've never used it, is like an unlimited whiteboard. There are a lot of different applications and platforms that do this. Prior to using Obsidian Canvas, I was using an app or a platform called Miro, which I still use for collaborative work and for classes and teaching. But for this writing project, I've been using Obsidian Canvas, and it's amazing. I don't know what I would be doing with this project if it weren't for Canvas. And so what we're looking at right now is a portion of the Canvas view. In this portion, we're looking at like this box with a bunch of other boxes in it. Well, each box is a file in Obsidian. So I'm going to kind of zoom in here for a minute. Okay, so what is all this and how do I use it? So this whole square is called a group. And what I've done here in this part of the canvas is I made a group called Shared Aspects of PBLs and Learning. And here PBLs is sort of stand-in for project-based learning and problem-based learning. And I'm building this organically over time as I'm working on the project. Over here on the left, this did not exist a couple of weeks ago because each of these rectangles is one of the writing files that we were just looking at. So if I were to open this, for instance, let's do students responsible for their own learning. I'm going to zoom in here. And one thing about Canvas is, let's open it. You have to like get it just right for it to open the file. So what you can see here, it's opening up a new tab, and it's going to put that file in there. It's just moving a little slowly because I have a lot of stuff open. So I was in Canvas, and then I clicked on this, and now it just opened up this file, and now I'm directly in that writing file. So normally what I'm doing is I'm in Canvas, and I'm looking at any of these rectangles which are purple, which weren't purple a couple weeks ago also, because any of these are just files in my vault that I put there because they related to each other. So here, students responsible for their own learning, same title, but this is a file that is a note. This is a file that is writing. And I'll show you one of the ways that I've figured out how to differentiate these so I don't get confused. So now I'm in what was a note that I made. So pretty short note. This is just on students being responsible for their own learning. This came from the literature note that I had from Barrows, 1998. This is an article called The Essentials of Problem-Based Learning from the Journal of Dental Education, because if you're like, you're in music education, why are you reading the Journal of Dental Education? It's because when you trace problem-based learning back to its roots, it comes out of the medical field. So here I was reading the Journal of Dental Education. But this note came from a literature note. It is a concept-based note. And I decided, okay, in the Canvas view, it belongs here. It's a shared aspect of both problem-based learning and project-based learning. When I was reading the original Barrows, it was focused on problem-based learning. But as I was writing and working with ideas, I decided I need a whole section of the Canvas view on problem-based learning. And then I need a section that's addressing aspects of problem-based learning that are shared with project-based learning. And then I need to figure out where does that go in the whole large-scale writing project, which I'll show you in a moment. But for now, it's organizing just this particular section. And so now I have these two notes, same title, but very different, because students responsible for their own learning, the writing note has a ton of information. That's my own connection between different notes and different writing and my thoughts and lots of different citations. And students responsible for their own learning, the note, is just this. It's just quotes from the literature note. So my writing process is to take different parts of different literature notes, these notes, these concept-based notes, and combine them with all the other notes that I have, my thinking, just the way that we do writing for those of us that write. And then I have these two different notes. So you could imagine how having two notes with the same title can get very confusing, and you can lose track of what's what. So here's a cool little plugin that I found that helps me with this. It's called Iconize, like iconize, as in take an icon and do something with it. And what I did is I created an icon for writing. So anytime that I have a writing chunk, it will have this little writing icon that I put there. And then the notes are defaulted to the default icon. And so that's what's doing that. So that's really helpful for me to stay organized. And then the way that I'm really organizing my writing, besides the Longform plugin that I showed you before, is this Canvas view as I'm moving ideas around and as I'm writing the writing chunks back and forth in relation to this Canvas view. So again, each of these ones that are purple right now are just are notes. There are most of them are very short concept-based notes. Again, pretty short, and I'm combining the ideas to help me come up with the writing. So if we were to go back to the Canvas view, you could see that this idea of students being responsible for their own learning had some parts of this writing note, and then they're now in a completely new form in this file, which is going to be a writing chunk of the large-scale writing project. And so you could see how right here, this helps me organize, oh, this might be a section, this might be a section, this might be a section. Maybe this whole thing is a chapter, or maybe these are not sections, maybe they're just headers in a section. I don't know yet what the granularity of each writing chunk is yet. I'm figuring that out as I go, but I'm going to show you why Canvas is super important to me, because even just this section here could get quite sprawling in terms of what I'm writing about and how I keep track of it. But check this out. I'm going to zoom out a bit, and this might take a while for this to show on the screen because of a little lag here. But I'm zooming out, and now you'll see that the shared aspects of problem-based learning and project-based learning is just one sort of tiny little square in a much bigger square that also has curricular issues in relationship to project-based learning and problem-based learning, which that will show up on the screen in a minute. Again, there's a little bit of lag here. But again, you could see like this area right here, shared aspects of problem-based learning, is a much smaller piece of all these other sections, problem-based learning and curricular issues. Over to the left, designing projects and problem scenarios, designing lessons and rehearsals, considerations to inform design. I'm going to scroll here to the left. And again, more writing chunks all over the place here. I have designing projects and problem scenarios. And you could see with the color coding, anything right now, this is a part of the system that I had to develop as I've been working here. Anything that is blue, let's try to zoom in a little bit. I know there's a bunch of lag right now. So anything that's blue is a writing chunk. Anything that's purple is a concept-based note that I have worked with, meaning that the information that's in that concept-based note is now located somewhere in a writing note or a writing chunk. Any of the rectangles that are white are almost all concept-based notes that I have not worked with yet in relationship to a writing note. So those are things that I still need to work on. So this week I've been working on this area called designing projects and problem scenarios. It shows up on the, I think, on the bottom right of your screen. And you can see I'm only partially through this top left of that square. There's a whole lot of concept-based notes that I need to work through and work with and develop ideas and writing with. And so they're just organized because I know that all of these concept-based notes have something to do with designing projects and problem scenarios. And so I spent a lot of time this semester organizing concept-based notes into larger ideas without necessarily writing big, long writing chunks, big, long chapters, because I needed to connect the ideas first. That's just my process that I have found about myself. As I move to the left here, again, you'll see there's just a lot all over the place, and I don't tend to write that I've learned in a very linear form. It's very nonlinear, very rhizomatic, very sprawling all over the place. So the canvas has allowed me to easily move between different topics and themes. In this case, they're all related to each other. But you could see, like, I might be working on types of learning opportunities and problems in one moment. That's what we're seeing coming across the screen here. Excuse me. And then right after that, you might see I might be working on relevance or residue, or the idea of openness in curriculum design. And so this canvas view helps me move between, because imagine having this all in one writing document and trying to remember, like, wait, where was that? What paragraph is that in? And so this helps to organize spatially the information. But what's even more sprawling than this is if I zoom out even more, that's just a part of designing learning opportunities. It's part of a much larger canvas. So it's like turtles all the way down, folks. The canvas can be divided into all different layers of granularity of writing. And this overview here, where I'm at right now, as I'm scrolling out, is sort of what will eventually be the overview of the entire writing project. So I can, at any point, find which part of the writing project I want to write about and go into that. And again, it's like layers and layers and layers of writing and information. The other thing, if this hasn't caused you either great joy or great stress in terms of the sprawl, the other thing you could do, which again has been really powerful in terms of moving around to different layers of granularity, is I have found that at some points there's just too much information for it to go in this sort of what I'm considering a meta canvas, or the overarching canvas of the project. So you can actually put canvases in Canvas. Now you can't, when you do that, when you put a canvas in a canvas, and it's basically like a link to another canvas, that's what this is right now. We're kind of zooming in here, and you're starting to see this part of the canvas is on different kinds of learning opportunities. That's what we're looking at here. So if I scroll up, this will make sense to you in a minute. If I scroll up, you could see, oh, yes, of course. When you think about a curriculum, you can have activities or exercises. You can have lessons, rehearsals, units. You can have project-based learning or projects, and you can have problem-based learning, problem scenarios, and lots of other things, right? So I wanted to get into like problem-based learning very specifically, and I was finding, okay, even for me, the sprawl is too much. So what I did is I created an entire separate canvas. So if you thought that this was sort of big and small, I now have the ability to go from this major canvas on all the different topics that I'm discussing to a canvas that's only about problem-based learning. So let's click on this, and you can see what this leads to now. So it's going to pop up over here in a minute once the lag stops. So I'll give it a minute to load. And now I will have a canvas that's focused only on problem-based learning. And this allows me to stay hyper-focused. It really is helpful for, I don't want to think about anything else right now. I just want to think about problem-based learning and have it very well organized. So you could see it's kind of coming into focus here. And again, it works exactly the same as the other canvas I was showing you. Let's kind of go into an area that I did a lot of work on earlier in sabbatical. So we're zooming in to a smaller portion of the problem-based learning part of the canvas view. And so again, this canvas is only about problem-based learning. It connects back to the other canvas that's on all the different aspects of learning and learning opportunities. And what I did is I organized the ideas, and instead of using an outline, and if outlines work for you, that's great, but for me, they don't work. I need a visualization. I visualized the flow of ideas so I could figure out what to write about when, and I figured out a way to show it visually and to move back and forth. But because this is Obsidian, as with the other canvas view, well, I shouldn't say anything in here. Most of the content in here are not what Canvas refers to as cards, which live only in the canvas view, but almost every rectangle you're looking at is actually a file in Obsidian. So they are either concept-based notes or writing chunks. If you were watching the earlier part of the video, I was showing you the writing chunks. And for those of you that are that didn't see that part, I'll show that to you again when I get back to the other canvas view. But if you're familiar with Obsidian, anytime that you go into the canvas, you have the option to put in a card or to put in a file from your vault. And so what we're looking at, this would be a card. This would be a card. Why problems? What is a problem? These are just notes to myself. But something like why problem-based learning, if I were to click on this, look at the top here. It's going to open up a tab. It's opening it up. There's just a little bit of lag. That's why things are taking a little bit long time. So now it opened up that note. And again, if you've never looked at Obsidian, this might look a little confusing, but for those of you that use Obsidian, this is a file. It's a concept-based note. Here's the metadata. It tells me, again, I talked about this a lot more in the earlier part of the video, that I'm using metadata to keep track of information. So I have the status of the note here, but all this information is either in this note or is possibly coming from other places. This has a lot of information in it. I can open and close all these headers, but this note is in this canvas because I know that I want to talk about the why of problem-based learning, and then after that, I'm going to talk about the concerns that might be in place that teachers have. I might talk about what it is next, and then how problems are part of a problem situation. So this is basically mapping out what I'm writing about at any given point. And again, it's the same thing that other canvas view. I can then move all of this into writing chunks. And this canvas just lets me kind of dive real deep. So you could see, if you follow the color coding, at one point a couple of weeks ago, I was going deep into working through all of these concept-based notes in these various degrees of organization. And then at some point, I realized, okay, I need to not focus right now just on problem-based learning. I need to go back to thinking about the relationship between problem-based learning and project-based learning and what they have shared. And that's when I started building out the Canvas view part, where it's talking mostly about shared characteristics. So the nice thing about having multiple Canvas views is you can kind of pop in and out of different types of parts of your project. Okay, now I want to work on problem-based learning. Now I want to work on the relationship between project-based learning and problem-based learning. Now I want to work on designing learning opportunities. So what's going to happen is, as things get more and more sprawling, I can copy and paste an entire chunk of a canvas, create a new canvas, put it in there, and then replace on here with another canvas view, or I could keep it very sprawling. It depends on how much complexity I can deal with at any given point and what makes the most sense for the writing. Because one thing that's happening in the part where I've been focusing on most recently with writing is most of the canvas is currently filled with concept-based notes, but it starts to get crowded as I come up with the writing chunks. And the writing chunks, I have started to put them in the canvas view as well. So I think at some point I might want a separate canvas view that has just the writing chunks in it, and then another canvas view that has also the concept-based notes in it. So again, I'm figuring out as I go along, but that hopefully gives you a sense of some of the ways that I'm using some systems. Again, in the beginning, I talked about the project management with Projects plugin. Then I talked about how I was using Longform plugin and notes and files in the Vault. And most recently, I was showing the Canvas view. And I'm using all of those in relationship with each other. I find Obsidian a really powerful and useful tool for keeping the ideas flowing, connecting ideas, writing. I think this project would be really difficult to do because of the way that I write, at least, and my writing. This might not work for you, but for me, it's really super helpful in my writing. So hopefully that gives you some ideas for organizing your own large-scale writing project and doing your writing and doing whatever your project is, and using project management, writing flows, and organizational structures in a way that is meaningful to you. So let me know what you think. I would love to hear about how you're organizing your own writing projects, so put those comments in below. And if there are more specific things that you want to know about any of the topics that I addressed, just ask me questions in the comments, and I'd love to answer them, maybe make some other related videos to share those, because I think the more folks who are kind of showing their process and sharing their approaches, I mean, that just helps all of us kind of do our work better, and maybe saves people time. I think at the end of the day, everyone needs to develop their own system, and all this is just how I've developed mine, and I hope you develop a system that works really well for you. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.